Starting in verse 16, Paul says this, "And as for all who walk by this rule, peace and mercy be upon them and upon the Israel of God." Here's what I have to say in my comments. This verse represents the final blessing of our letter to Galatians, and thus brings his arguments against the influencers to a close. Since this verse follows immediately after verse 15, right? So we have to really read verse 15, which reads, "For neither circumcision counts for anything nor uncircumcision, but a new creation." Right? That's the context of what he says, why he brings in verse 16, "And as for all who walk by this rule." All right, keep that in mind. So because verse 15 and 16 are together, most of you know that in the original Greek letter that Paul wrote, there were no really verse and chapter breaks anyway. So this very well could have been just one verse. It's just up to the translators. You guys understand that? So I take the phrase "this rule," the term "this rule" in this verse, where Paul says, "And as for all who walk by this rule." So I think that's a specific reference back to the theology of verse 15. So I take this rule to refer to the standard of forensic righteousness, which is basically salvation, right? Salvation-based righteousness. In other words, salvation from the internal, eternal, spiritual, heavenly perspective, as opposed to mere earthly, temporal, physical salvation, like say salvation from your enemies, or salvation from a natural disaster, or from some imminent danger, or something like that. Not that kind of salvation, but the forensic righteousness. So I take this term, this rule, to be referring to this forensic righteousness that was previously spoken about in verse 15, namely genuine and lasting covenant membership, as Paul is trying to explain to his members there, the Gentile members of the congregations. Genuine and lasting covenant membership into the eternal people of God is not procured, that is, secured or gotten, right? It's not had by one's ethnicity. It doesn't happen by becoming Jewish or being born Jewish. Rather, it only happens by placing one's genuine and lasting faith in Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen? Amen. And so I think that's what Paul's trying to get across when he says all who walk by this rule. What rule? The rule that there's neither Jew nor Greek, neither male nor female, neither slave nor free, like he uses in other passages, or to use the verbiage of verse 15, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision. He kind of just scales it down here. But essentially, we know what this means for us today is that there's not a prerequisite before God can count you as forensically righteous. In other words, you don't have to accomplish some change in status before God will accept you into the family of the saved, the family of the blessed. You guys know what I mean by that.